What if you were a driver that started the racing career in single-seaters, racing in DTM because there were no openings for single-seaters, go to kart, go to the Indy Racing League, win a championship, go to NASCAR, go back to IndyCar after a failed NASCAR career, and dominate the sport by winning 3 IndyCar titles in a row? That, my fellow viewers, was Dario Franchitti's racing career in a nutshell from the early 90s to 2013. Now that you know the short story of Dario Franchitti's career, here's the full story of Dario's career and his IndyCar domination comeback. This is an IndyCar Championship, Dario Franchitti's title three-peat. The story starts with Dario Franchitti joining the Indy Racing League by making his IRL debut at the 2002 Indianapolis 500. Dario Franchitti was starting 28th and finished in 19th place, 3 laps down. After finishing his kart career, Dario Franchitti made the move over to the Indy Racing League in 2003. Unfortunately, Franchitti only competed in 3 races because he suffered a fractured back injury due to a motorbike accident. His best finish was a 4th place at Pikes Peak. Dario would come back in 2004 fully recovered to compete in his full season for the first time in the sport. Dario Franchitti would get his first career win at Milwaukee after leading 111 laps and would win again at Pikes Peak after leading 129 laps. Despite having 2 wins and 4 podiums, his 2004 season was a struggle. He had 16 Fs due to crashes and car issues and an average of 10.4 and finished 15th in points. Between 2005 and 2006, Dario would have 2 wins and 8 podiums, finished 4th in 2005 and 8th in 2006, much better than 2004. But in 2007, Dario Franchitti would become a threat. During the first 4 races of the 2007 season, Dario Franchitti would have 3 top 5s and 4 top 10s with a 7th place finish at Homestead, a 5th at St. Petersburg, a 3rd at Motegi, and a 2nd at Kansas. Coming into the 2007 Indianapolis 500, Dario was 4th in points. Dario Franchitti not only got pied on his birthday, but he would start in 3rd at the Greatest Spectacle Racing outside the front row for the 2007 edition of the Indianapolis 500 on Memorial Day weekend. Dario would lead 15 laps from lap 74 to lap 88. Franchitti would once again lead 6 more laps between laps 137 to 143. Dario would once again take the lead on lap 155. While Dario was leading the race, weather was on the way, and the drivers are doing their best to get in as many laps as possible before it was going to rain again. Then, on lap 163, chaos took place at the back straightaway.
Jack, what's going on?
Well,
oh no, another crash and it's upside down. We've got a car upside down. It's Marco Andretti. 2 cars at least involved in this. Buddy Rice as well. Buddy was taken out last year in a crash with Elio. This year, a crash with Marco.
While Dario Franchitti was in first place, Dario's teammate Marco Andretti was upside down on his roof. After the wreck, it was downpouring and raining hard. It was raining on Dario's parade because after 166 laps, the race was called and Dario Franchitti would win his very first Indianapolis 500. After winning at Indy, Dario Franchitti would be 3rd in points. For the next 6 races between Milwaukee and Mid-Ohio, Dario Franchitti would win 2 races at the inaugural Iowa race and Richmond. He would not only finish top 5 and top 10 for the next 6 races, but he would get the point lead. After Milwaukee, it would hold on to it. Speaking of holding on, Dario Franchitti would hold on for dear life after going airborne at Michigan while the big one took place. Dario would finish 13th and would still keep the point lead. The reason why Dario had the point lead, despite being upside down, was because Scott Dixon was part of the crash and DNF'd due to handling problems, and Dario was more consistent than Scott throughout the season. Leaving the Irish Hills, Dario would have a 24-point lead ahead of Scott Dixon. However, that would change in Kentucky. Despite leading 52 laps, Dario Franchitti would finish P8 upside down again. Because Scott Dixon finished 2nd, Dario Franchitti would still have an 8-point lead ahead of Scott Dixon, leaving Kentucky. Even though Dario kept it on 4 wheels at Sonoma and dominated the race by leading 62 laps, championships will be implicated for Dario when he and Andretti Green Racing's teammate Marco Andretti crashed in the first corner on lap 69. Nice. Thankfully, Dario would recover and finish 3rd. Unfortunately for Dario, Scott Dixon will not only win the race, but would have a 4-point lead ahead of Dario leaving wine country. With 2 races to go at Belle Isle, championships were implicated once again. However, it was for Scott Dixon. During a tight battle between Buddy Rice and Dario Franchitti, Scott Dixon will go to the inside of Buddy Rice, and Rice would hit the tire barrier. Dixon would spin, and Franchitti would crash into Dixon while trying to avoid him. After the crash, Michael Andretti, the owner of Dario's number 27 ride, would have some words about the collision.
Let's go to Vince.
Michael Andretti, what was your thought there on the contact between Scott Dixon and Dario Franchitti?
Poor sportsmanship is what I saw. I mean, he clearly took Dario out on purpose. I mean, he was rolling there, he was going fine, and he saw Dario was ready to go to the outside of him, let off his brake, and took Dario out. I mean, it was totally on purpose. I'm protesting this. This is that's not the way to do it. I'm really disappointed in Scott, to be honest with you.
Marty?
Well, I'm not sure he's seeing the same race we're seeing. I got to be honest here. I mean, the contact was with Buddy Rice and then down further. I mean, we'd have to see it again.
Thankfully for Dario, he would drive away and finish 6th, while Scott Dixon finished in P8. That battle was even tighter, leaving Belle Isle. Dario and Scott were 3 points apart coming into the Windy City at Chicagoland Speedway. After a clean and hard racing day, the championship battle came down in a 3-lap shootout. Oh baby, it was on.
You heard the call. We're back to green flag racing. 2 laps to decide the championship. And they're out front on the high side. It's Dario. Underneath, it is Scott Dixon. Who has enough fuel? Coming out of 2.
And Dixon's pushing Dario up to the high line, but he's got to watch the low side because here comes the 6 car of Sam Hornish, who might just play a part on who gets the surge across the line for the final lap.
Coming to the white flag. 1 lap to go, this time by. The championship at stake. Who's going to get it? Will it be Scott Dixon from New Zealand or this year's Indy 500 winner, Dario Franchitti from Scotland? Down the backstretch for the final time. Dixon in control. Into 3. If Dario has anything, he's going up, and Dixon's out of fuel. Dixon is out of fuel. Dario Franchitti's going to win the race and the championship.
You bloody perfect, mate. Unbelievable. Stop in turn 3. Stop in turn 3. Stop in turn. He was in the left. That was mine.
That gentleman you saw was Dario's father, George. That's him right there. There is Scott Dixon out of fuel in turn number 1.
And just like that, Dario Franchitti would win the 2007 IndyCar Series Championship after championship rival Scott Dixon ran out of gas. After Dario Franchitti won the title, he went to NASCAR? Dario Franchitti went to NASCAR because he wanted a challenge. Ironically, this was during NASCAR's open wheel invasion when IndyCar and Formula 1 drivers went to NASCAR. Even though Dario wasn't a championship hunt, he did some NASCAR races. Dario did 1 ARCA race at Talladega, 1 truck race at Martinsville, and 4 NASCAR Busch Series races. In 2008, Dario Franchitti would complete a full season of NASCAR. He would do the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series and the NASCAR Nationwide Series. Dario would start in 40th and finish 33rd at the 2008 edition of the Great American Race. In 10 races, his best finish was a 22nd at Martinsville and would finish 4 races. In the Nationwide Series, he did 14 races and had 1 top 5 and 2 top 10s. Unfortunately, his highlight of the Nationwide Series 2008 season in his NASCAR career was his crash at Talladega, suffering ankle injuries after having a right rear tie down and getting struck by the number 91 of Larry Gunzelman. Thankfully, Dario did come back and would continue to do some NASCAR races after recovering, but his NASCAR stint in 2008 would last 6 months. His last NASCAR race was at the 2008 Food City 250. Dario Franchitti would start 2nd and finish 11th, and just like that, his NASCAR career was over. Thankfully, Dario Franchitti did return to IndyCar 2008, but it was an exhibition race at Surfers Paradise, racing for the number 10 Target Chip Ganassi team, and ironically being teammates with his 2007 championship rival and 2008 Indianapolis 500 champion, Scott Dixon. Despite finishing in 16th at Surfers Paradise, nobody was ready to see what Dario could do in 2009. Now this is where the real story begins. Dario's 2009 season would kick off with a 4th place finish at St. Petersburg, and a win at the 2009 Grand Prix Long Beach. It would take the point lead right away. And unfortunately, his point lead would not last long. On lap 153 at Kansas, Dario Franchitti would crash out of the race, finishing in 18th. Luckily, he would be third in points, 4 points behind point leader Tony Kanaan. Dario Franchitti would finish in 7th at the 2009 Indianapolis 500 and take the point lead away from Tony Kanaan after Kanaan crashed in turn 3 in lap 98, finishing in 27th. For the next 4 races between Milwaukee and Richmond, he would have 3 top 5s and 4 top 10s. Dario would also win at Iowa. After finishing second at Richmond, Dario would take the point lead, but he would lead by 1 point ahead of teammate Scott Dixon. Looks like it'll be round 2 between Dario and Scott, but this time they're teammates. Throughout the rest of the season, Dario would finish outside the top 10 once. It was at Watkins Glen. On lap 23, Dario Franchitti would spin in turn 5. He would finish in 15th place, 1 lap down. While Scott Dixon finished 3rd, leaving the Glen, Dario was 2nd, 19 points behind Scott Dixon, and was also tied with Ryan Briscoe. If Dario Franchitti wants to go for 2nd Astor Cup, he would have to be strong and consistent. Between Toronto and Motegi, Dario Franchitti will have 2 wins at Toronto and Sonoma and 4 podiums. All races have been top 10s. He's been in the top 3 in points throughout the last 7 races before Homestead. It was a 3-car championship battle between Dario Franchitti, Scott Dixon, and Ryan Briscoe. Ryan Briscoe had an incident at lap 107 at Motegi. Briscoe just left the pit box after his service was finished. Briscoe got out of control and crashed into the inside wall. Ryan Briscoe was still in this race, but he would finish in 18th place, 15 laps down. Adding insult to injuries of his championship hopes, Scott Dixon would win the race and Dario Franchitti would finish in 2nd. However, the 3-car battle for the title was still on coming into Homestead. Homestead, race 17. The championship will be decided. Dario Franchitti versus Scott Dixon versus Ryan Briscoe. The race was a caution-free race. Ryan Briscoe led the most laps by leading 103 laps. Scott Dixon led 70 laps and Dario Franchitti led 25 laps. All 3 of those contenders were the class of the race and even finished on the lead lap together. However, the championship battle of 2009 changed drastically when Scott Dixon and Ryan Briscoe made a splash and go with 7 to go. Dario had enough fuel to not only win the race, but he would also win the 2009 IndyCar Championship by 10 points ahead of Scott Dixon and 12 points ahead of Ryan Briscoe. 2009 was a close and tight battle between his teammate Scott Dixon and Team Penske's Ryan Briscoe. For the next 2 years, in 2010-2011, Dario Franchitti will have a championship rivalry with a newly full-time Penske driver, Will Power. Dario Franchitti's first 5 races of 2010 season started off pretty solid. He finished 7th at Sao Paulo, a 5th at St. Petersburg after spinning in turn 2 on lap number 1, a 3rd at the inaugural Barber race, and a 12th at Long Beach. Despite having a solid start, it was pretty unusual. To make it even difficult for him, Will Power's 2010 start of the season was a rocket ship. Power would win the first 2 races of the season at Sao Paulo and St. Petersburg, a 4th place at Barber, and a 3rd place at Long Beach. During the next 3 races, Dario Franchitti will have a consistent 3-race stretch with a 2nd at Kansas, winning the 2010 Indianapolis 500, which would be his 2nd win at Indy, and a 5th place at Texas. Meanwhile, Will Power's 3-race stretch was inconsistent. He finished 12th at Kansas. He finished 8th at the 2010 Indianapolis 500 after some problems on pit road on lap 146 and also some fuel hose issues, and a 14th place at Texas. Due to Power's inconsistency, Dario Franchitti would finally get the point lead, leaving Texas. Unfortunately for Dario, he would lose the point lead again, despite leading 69 laps. At Iowa, Dario would have engine issues while leading. His team had to push his car to keep going, thankfully. Thankfully, Dario did finish the race by finishing 18th, losing 2 positions in points in 3rd, 14 points behind Will Power, who finished in 5th, and Scott Dixon as well. Between Watkins Glen and Motegi, the championship fight was on between Dario Franchitti and Will Power. Dario would be in the podium 7 times, with 2 more wins at Toronto and Chicago. Will Power will have 6 podiums with 3 more wins at Watkins Glen, Toronto, and Sonoma. Despite Will Power running out of fuel at Chicagoland, Power still had the point lead. Throughout the last 7 races, Will Power and Dario Franchitti were 1-2 in points, but the championship battle was set to conclude at Homestead Miami Speedway. Race 17, Homestead, 7 months of competition, 2 drivers, 12 points, but only 1 would win it all. Things were going well for both Dario and Will until one of them had their championships implicated.
And we think it was Will Power may have brushed the wall. Wow. You saw the white sidewalls on the tires indicating the championship rings being worn by Power and Franchitti. Let's take a look at it.
Behind Ryan Hunter-Ray. You're up pretty high there. That is up in some gray.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Well, that was that. I mean, everything looks good there, but that was a lot of brush in the wall.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of contact.
Did you see that he didn't move his wheel at all? You're just up in the gray there, and you get the marbles, and just it slides up in the wall. There's nothing he can do.
On lap 143, Will Power brushed the turn 4 wall, which damaged the suspension of the car. There were attempts for him to continue, but the damage was just too severe to keep going. Will Power would finish in 25th, behind the wall. Dario Franchitti would dominate the race by leading 128 laps, but he would finish in 8th. Because Will Power's misfortunes of staying out of trouble, Dario Franchitti would win his 3rd IndyCar championship in the last 4 years. Dario would win the championship by 5 points ahead of Will Power, and now it was on to 2011. Believe it or not, Dario Franchitti and Will Power have been the only drivers to be 1-2 in points throughout the entire 2011 season. They were that dominant, but how dominant were they? Let's find out. During the first 5 races, Dario Franchitti will have 1 win at St. Petersburg, 3 podiums, 4 top 10s, and a 12th place finish at Indy, while Will Power would have 2 wins at Barber and Sao Paulo, 3 podiums, 3 top 5s, and 4 top 10s, and a 14th place finish at Indy. The next races were at the Texas Twins. Back in 2011, IndyCar raced at Texas twice in one night, which was an interesting idea for its time when it came to the track. Dario Franchitti will win the first Texas race, and Will Power would win the second Texas race. After Dario won at Milwaukee, Will Power finished P4th. Will Power would have a horrible night at Iowa. He would have a pit road incident with Charlie Kimball. It would crash out of the race in turn 2 on lap 91. Will Power would finish in 21st. Dario Franchitti would finish in 5th. Coming into Toronto, Dario Franchitti had a 20-point lead ahead of Will Power. Power would need a good race to get closer, but unfortunately, 2 worlds collided between Dario Franchitti and Will Power on lap 57. On lap 57, Will Power and Dario Franchitti were battling for P5. Coming into turn 3, Dario Franchitti took out Will Power. Adding insult to injury, Will Power would crash out in turn 5 again on lap 66. After his race was done, Will Power was not holding back his frustrations towards Dario, Chip, and how IndyCar deals with Dario.
Well, Will, first take us through the contact with Dario. What's your perspective on that? He was penalized, originally what we were told, now no penalty.
Well, it doesn't surprise me he didn't get a penalty because he never gets penalized. It's pretty typical, pretty dirty move. So bam, just turns me around. Ah, man, that guy. Does anyone ever penalize this guy? Dirty as you like. I left the inside open under brakes. I turned, my guys did a great pit stop, got me out in front. And yeah, man, really disappointed in Dario. I always race him clean, and he always races me dirty. He did the same at St. Pete, drove me into the wall. I didn't say anything. He did it again today.
Did you come together with Tagliani at one point as well?
Yeah, I think Tag hit me. Pretty typical for him. He's always a bit of a wanker, so he took me out completely that time. So not good for the Verizon car. Man, 2 races in a row we're out. But yeah, disappointed in Dario, the guy that mouths off about everyone and that whinges about everyone, and he's a guy who races the most dirty, never gets a penalty from IndyCar. It's just not right.
A very frustrated and very pointed Will Power.
There's a driver that's pretty much fed up.
Yeah.
Right there, it's Will Power.
The whole thing with Will, I got a run on him down into turn 3, and I braked on the limit, and he braked later than me, and I thought, well, that's pretty impressive. What happened was, the wall starts to come out there, about the apex. I'm holding the wall, and Will starts to come in. And I saw him coming in, and I started to try and get out of it. I was like, oh man, and we made contact. So racing incident, I'll take my 50% of the blame. Put it this way, if he did it to me, I'd be pissed off too. So I understand why he's pissed off, but it was certainly not intentional. Had there been a drive-through, I'd have been really pissed off about it.
And I still left him some room on the inside, and he just drilled me in the right rear. So disappointing, that guy. And he's the one who complains about everything, whinges about everyone, and he's twice done me dirty on the track. It's just unbelievable. And then IndyCar won't penalise him because Chip Ganassi goes up there and gives it to him. Well, why do they retract the penalty? Why? Because Chip would have gone up and said, you're going to get fired if he gets a penalty. It's just wrong.
But regardless of the outcome, Dario Franchitti would once again win at Toronto and would have a 55-point lead ahead of Will Power. Dario Franchitti would finish third at Edmonton while Will Power won the race. But Franchitti finishing second at Middle-Ohio while Will Power finished at 14th helped Dario gain a 62-point lead. However, Dario's championship lead would shrink by 15 points in New Hampshire. On a restart lap 119, Dario Franchitti, who was leading the field down to the green, made contact with Takuma Sato coming to the line and crashed out of the race, involving Sato and Jared Hildebrand. Dario would finish in 20th. However, Will Power would also suffer in a restart crash thanks to Brian Barnhart's stupidity to continue the race while it was raining, which would see Will Power giving the iconic 2 number 1s to IndyCar. Power would finish in 5th and Dario Franchitti is 47 points ahead of Will Power. After the Nightmare Mile at New Hampshire was over with, Dario Franchitti would finish in 4th at Sonoma and Baltimore and the 8th at Motegi Road Course. As for Will Power, he was having a better and more consistent 3-race stretch with 2 straight wins at Sonoma and Baltimore and a second at the Motegi Road Course. After the Motegi Road Course, Dario Franchitti would be second, 11 points behind Will Power coming into Kentucky. Dario needed a miracle to take back the point lead before Las Vegas, and Dario just got that. On lap 50, Will Power was going to his pit box until he was hit by Anna Beatriz when she was about to exit out of her pit box. Will Power would finish in 19th, while Dario Franchitti finished second to Ed Carpenter in a photo finish, 18 points ahead of Will Power leaving Kentucky. The championship in Sin City was on at Las Vegas. 2 drivers, 18 points, but 1 champion would be crowned. During the race, Dario Franchitti was moving on up while Will Power was dropping like a rock. Unfortunately, everybody knows the story of what went down on lap 11 at Las Vegas. One of the biggest crashes in IndyCar history took place, killing Dan Wheldon. Will Power was part of the crash and lost the championship for the 2nd year in a row. Dario Franchitti will avoid the accident and win his 4th IndyCar title in 3 straight years. However, that did not matter. That was not important. The sport lost one of the best IndyCar drivers in our time. Dan Wheldon was 33 years old. Despite a tragic ending to the 2011 championship battle, Dario Franchitti would win his 4th and final championship, beating Will Power for the 2nd year in a row. Between 2012 and 2013, Dario would never fight for a championship ever again. He would only win the 2012 Indianapolis 500 for the 3rd and final time. But the rest of those 2 seasons have been some struggles and unlike Dario kind of seasons. Unfortunately, Dario Franchitti would suffer a horrible accident at the last lap at the 2nd Houston Grand Prix race, ending his IndyCar career. Nowadays, Dario is a driving coach for Chip Ganassi, commentates Formula E, and he drives classic race cars in Goodwood and is a family man. This story is honestly crazy and interesting to make a video on. Imagine winning the championship in 2007, focus on NASCAR 2008, even though it did not work out well, return to IndyCar, and win 3 Astor Cups in a row like you never left. That is very impressive, and it shows how much of a legend Dario Franchitti was on track. But to be honest, I do think about 2008. What if Dario Franchitti never went to NASCAR 2008? Would he ever win the 2008 IndyCar Championship and win 5 straight championships in a row? Who knows? That is all we can think of. But regardless, Dario Franchitti is a legend that made a legendary return to IndyCar after his NASCAR stint. I feel like he deserves more credit and deserves to be in the same conversations as the best drivers of the 2001 century like Scott Dixon and Will Power. Before I end this episode, I just want to apologize for the lack of content on this channel and not uploading racing stories since November. I have been very busy with life outside of this channel, whether it's work, making videos of my original main channel, and other stuff outside of YouTube. I will do my best to make more videos on this channel and also work on my racing story series more often. So I just want to put it out there, and I do apologize. Things happen, but hopefully I can continue with this series and other videos on this channel moving forward. So that is going to conclude this episode of Racing Stories. It feels great to be back working on this series. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching this episode and waiting patiently for more videos on this channel. This is the Impress 2000 signing off. Goodbye, everybody.